ਇਹ ਮਸਲਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਇਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਹੋਂਦ ਦਾ ਆ, ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਗੰਭੀਰ ਆ ਤੇ वन कोस्ट तो लैके दूसरे कोस्ट तक सानू ये स्टोरियां आ रही ने। मतलब मैं वैंकूवर तो लैके मॉन्ट्रियल की गल कर रहा हाँ, हरेक शहर दे विच ये जिहड़ा मसला हैगा आ ये उठ रहा है।
ये जिहड़ा फरोतियां दा सिलसिला चल रहा ये असल विच बीमारी नहीं, ये बीमारी दे लक्षण पिछे सानू पता भी किहदा हाथ किहदे ऑर्डर दिते जा रहे हैं जिहदे करके सारा सिलसिला शुरू किया गया। तो जिवें भाई बलप्रीत सिंह ने भी आख्या तो पहला वीडियो भी चल रही सीगी, ये सारिया गल्लां कैनेडियन गवर्नमेंट के जिहड़े सीनियर ऑफिशियल एजेंसी के सीनियर ऑफिशियल के मूहों उन्होंने आप ये गल्लां मन्नियां।
When we talk about extortions and transnational repression, it's not two different things. Both are tools used by one government to instill fear in us here. चाहे वो जिहड़े साडे सिख लीडर ने उन्हां नूं मारन दीयां धमकियां दे के उन्होंने डराया जाए, चाहे वो जिहड़े साडे इत्थे सिर कट बिजनेसमैन ने उन्हां दे कोलों पैसे मंग के उन्हां दे घरां दे उन्हां दे बिजनेसेस दे उत्ते गोलियां चला के उन्होंने डराया जाए, सारी इक्को ही गल आ।
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Simrat Garwal, and I'm so honored to serve as your MC for today's town hall. Before we begin, we're asking all guests to please keep the distractions at a minimum and to not block the entrance of the venue. We have a lot of seats still available, and to please stand on the other side of the venue. Thank you. All right, thank you. Look, we get started. I want to thank all of you guys to take time out of your Sunday afternoon to join us here today at a town hall where we're speaking about Indian transnational repression and extortion in Canada. Your presence really reflects the importance of this issue and the strength of our community. I'd like to say thank you to all the members of Parliament and the members of provincial Parliament that are joining us today. And additionally, I'd like to show gratitude to Rod Power, Regional Councillor of Ward 7 and 8, Harkirat Singh, Deputy Mayor, Regional Councillor of Ward 9 and 10, Dennis Keenan, Regional Councillor of Ward 3 and 4, Navjeet Kaur Barar, Regional Councillor of Ward 2 and 6, and Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown. We also have in attendance today the Peel Police Chief, Nishan Dariappa. Today's town hall addresses a very important issue that is deeply significant to all Sikhs across the Canadian diaspora, and all Canadians as abroad. Indian transnational repression is not a distant concept. It's a lived experience, one that threatens our safety, our democratic right as Canadians, and our ability to engage in advocacy without fear. As Sikhs, our history has taught us to defend for justice, protect the vulnerable, and prioritize the well-being for our broader community. In that spirit, grounded in clarity, unity, and courage, is that today we gather. But today, there's another layer and another layer to this conversation, and that is the narrative. Right now, the narrative has become a central battleground to such issues. Different sides are saying and claiming whatever they must to shape political reception. And when the narrative becomes contested, the truth can be easily drowned in strategic framing, what we call a 5D chess. Calculated moves are meant to confuse, distract, and redefine the issues entirely. Right now, we've seen India go from being a threat to Canadians to an economic partner without accountability. This is why we gather here today. Our job today is to cut through the noise and center the truth, and to ground these issues with lived experiences of our community. And this is not meant to be a political event to spin the narrative and to spin the narrative for convenient storytelling. This discussion is meant to protect its own citizens from foreign interference and coercion. By being here today, we are asserting that the narrative will not be written about us. It will be written with us. Informed with true understanding of such issues, we'll be hearing from the representatives of our organizing bodies. Please welcome representatives from WSO, the World Sikh Organization, the Ontario Gurdwara Committee, and Sikh Federation of Canada.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਮੈਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰੂੰਗਾ। ਸਾਰੀ ਸੰਗਤ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ। ਤੇ ਇਹ ਮਸਲਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ ਇਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਹੋਂਦ ਦਾ ਆ, ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਗੰਭੀਰ ਆ ਤੇ ਵਨ ਕੋਸਟ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਕੋਸਟ ਤੱਕ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਸਟੋਰੀਆਂ ਆ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ। ਮਤਲਬ ਮੈਂ ਵੈਂਕੂਵਰ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਮੌਂਟਰੀਅਲ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਆ। ਹਰੇਕ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮਸਲਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਇਹ ਉੱਠ ਰਿਹਾ ਆ। ਸੋ ਬਾਕੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਇਲੈਕਟਡ ਅਫੀਸ਼ੀਅਲਸ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਂਝੀ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜਵਾਬਦੇਹ ਹੋਣਗੇ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਕੀ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਇਸ ਮਸਲੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ। ਸੋ ਆਮ ਗੋਇੰਗ ਟੂ ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਸਟਾਰਟ ਆਊਟ ਔਨ ਬਿਹਾਫ ਆਫ ਦ ਵਰਲਡ ਸਿੱਖ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਆਫ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ to try and put us all on the same page when it comes to how we see this issue and what we think are the foundational facts that everyone needs to be clear on. So for us, as a Sikh community, we've lived with foreign interference and transnational oppression for the past 40 years. For 40 years, our community has known that India targets members of our community, whether that's for visa coercion, economic coercion, or even assassination. But for us, it was a foundational moment, it was a transformational moment when on October 14th, 2024, our RCMP, elected officials and government officials made some things very clear. So these aren't things that I am saying, these are the things that our government and police have told us. So let me go through them. The RCMP announcement said that homicides, extortions, and violent acts in Canada were linked to agents of the government of India, that there were over a dozen credible threats to pro-Khalistan Sikhs in Canada, that there's been interference in democratic processes, and that India has used the Bishnoi gang as a proxy to create fear in Sikh communities. And I'm going to quote from what Prime Minister Trudeau said. This is literally a quote from him. He said, "It seems like folks within the Indian government have decided to create violence and unlawfulness in Canada as a way of demonstrating the point that they're trying to make. And that point is that Canada is lawless, insecure." We learned from the RCMP that Indian diplomats and consular officials were involved in clandestine intelligence gathering, and that Canadians and businesses were being coerced and threatened to gather information for India. And when the RCMP and senior Canadian officials presented evidence to their Indian counterparts, India refused to cooperate. And as a result, six Indian diplomats were thrown out of Canada for suspected roles in criminal activities. That's what we learned from our government officials. And I want to go through some other facts. These are facts. The first fact is that the Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister, David Morrison, testified that India's Home Minister, Amit Shah, who is the right-hand man of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, had personally ordered the campaign of violence and intelligence gathering against Sikhs in Canada. This is not me saying it. This is the Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister of Canada. That India's Home Minister, Amit Shah, has directly ordered these activities here in Canada. The next is our NSIA, Natalie Drouin, her testimony in front of a parliamentary committee. She said that India collected intelligence on Sikhs in Canada through diplomatic channels and proxies, then passed it on to Indian authorities who were working with the Lawrence Bishnoi gang to commit criminal activities and hits here in Canada. This is our NSIA saying that the Bishnoi gang is being directly influenced and directed by the government of India. One other fact that I'd like to share with you. So with Prime Minister Carney coming to power, in May 2025, the Privy Council Office before Prime Minister Carney's first call with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, sent a briefing note which said that Canada would require a public commitment from India on accountability efforts to be mutually agreed upon. Public accountability measures. We haven't seen any of that. And the final fact that I'd like to share with you is that despite the fact that India's new High Commissioner to Canada insists very publicly that India has never engaged in foreign interference or transnational repression, in June 2025, this year, the Indian government appointed Parag Jain, a former Punjab police officer accused of extrajudicial killings, torture, as the new head of its intelligence wing, RAW. And the most interesting thing there is that he was posted in Ottawa as a diplomat from 2015 to 2018. This is a fact, that a former Ottawa Indian diplomat who was accused of killing Sikhs, torturing Sikhs, is now head of India's RAW, their intelligence body. These are facts. So what is our current situation? Our current situation is that India-based and directed criminal activities, in fact a crime wave, is taking place across this country. There are hundreds of victims. Hundreds of victims. In fact, the vast majority of victims, in fact, some of you who have approached me today and aren't willing to speak publicly are telling me their stories and saying that we don't know what to do. No one takes any sort of action. We feel insecure. There are ongoing duties to warn being given and no substantive protections. And literally, when a duty to warn is given, this means that someone's life is in imminent danger. And when, I'm going to quote someone, he is a member of a community organization. When he asked, "What should I do?" the answer was, quote unquote, "You gotta do what you gotta do." And our Indian High Commissioner, who has now followed the Sikhs that were kicked out for criminal activities, has now arrived in Canada and is giving interview after interview, spreading disinformation that India never did anything in terms of foreign interference, never targeted anyone in this country. And the question that we are all here to examine and ask is that, is this not second-class citizenship? Why do our lives seem to matter less? And I've given this example before. If the Russian government employed Russian gangs to target Ukrainian dissidents here in Canada and killed some of them, would our government be re-engaging with Russia on oil? Would we be inviting President Putin to come here and have a weekend in the mountains? If a rabbi was shot dead in a synagogue parking lot by the regime in Iran, would we be re-engaging with Iran and inviting the Ayatollah here? Hardeep Singh Nijjar was shot dead in a Gurdwara parking lot as a symbol of what India can do here to Sikhs in Canada, to frighten us, to silence us. And they don't seem to understand that we'll never be frightened, we'll never be silenced. But what is our government doing about the situation? And that's what we're here to ask our elected officials and hear from our other police officials and municipal and provincial politicians. So thank you for everyone for coming, and now I'll pass it on to Pravjot Singh, who will speak on behalf of the Sikh Federation.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ. So we're all here today because after the events of the past year and a half, we finally started to recognize that the extortions that are happening against this community, this wave of violence that's happening across our community, across this entire country, is a national crisis, and that something needs to be done. But when we look at this issue of extortion, when we look at the violence that's happening, it's crucial, and one of the reasons that this town hall needed to be organized by the community is to recognize and put front and center that this isn't a law and order issue. Nor is this a regional issue of just impacting community members in Brampton or in Surrey or just in Calgary. This is a national security issue, and the root of this issue is foreign interference and transnational repression. The extortions and the violence we're seeing are a symptom of Indians' coordinated attacks on this country and the Sikh community. ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਫਰੋਤੀਆਂ ਦਾ ਸਿਲਸਿਲਾ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ, ਇਹ ਅਸਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਿਮਾਰੀ ਨਹੀਂ, ਇਹ ਬਿਮਾਰੀ ਦੇ ਲੱਛਣ ਆ। ਪਿੱਛੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਦਾ ਹੱਥ ਕਿਹਦੇ ਆਰਡਰ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਆ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਸਿਲਸਿਲਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ। ਤੇ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਭਾਈ ਬਲਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਆਖਿਆ ਤੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਵੀਡੀਓ ਵੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਸੀਗੀ, ਇਹ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੀਨੀਅਰ ਅਫੀਸ਼ੀਅਲ, ਏਜੰਸੀ ਦੇ ਸੀਨੀਅਰ ਅਫੀਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਦੇ ਮੂੰਹੋਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪ ਇਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਮੰਨੀਆਂ। So the reason we needed to organize this town hall, gathering all of Canada's largest Sikh advocacy organizations and institutions and major gurdwara across this entire country, in a series of town halls, starting today, next week, going across to the West Coast as well, is because there's an increasing trust deficit between the community and the government today. Because we know that the root of the violence that's impacting our communities is originating in India, but it's this government's lack of action and the U-turn and this realignment with India that's enabling or failing to stop India's violence in its tracks. So when we look at India's actions, one thing is unequivocally clear, that India is in a category of its own when we talk about foreign interference and transnational repression. China, Russia, Iran, no other country has come to this country, assassinated a citizen, a leader of our community, and targeted dozens of other individuals for assassination, and unleashed a spree, a coordinated a wave of violence across this country that was coordinated from the consulates and embassies itself. India is engaged in electoral interference, it's engaged in disinformation, and one of the most concerning and dangerous forms of foreign interference is this idea of cognitive warfare. So last year, a lot of individuals who followed the findings of the Foreign Interference Commission knew that there was evidence that came from CSIS that India is engaging in cognitive warfare. Cognitive warfare is a form of warfare and a form of aggression that takes neuroscience, digital technologies, and combines them with psychological operations. Not just to spread confusion, but to manipulate public perceptions and community decision-making across the country, within the community and in terms of the government. And CSIS has released and unclassified documents that were released to the Commission that are unequivocally clear that India seeks to use cognitive warfare techniques to promote a pro-India and anti-Sikh, anti-Khalistan narrative in Canada using these techniques. And when Prime Minister Trudeau was questioned at the Foreign Interference Commission last year about this violence, about the nature of this violence and its objectives, as Balpreet Singh shared, the Prime Minister, under oath, testified before the Commission that it's individuals within the Indian government that are creating violence and unlawfulness in Canada as a way of demonstrating a point that they're trying to make, that there is violence and unlawfulness in Canada. So this is going beyond the threshold of disinformation and psychological operations and trying to spread confusion and panic just through false news. Senior level government officials orchestrated, coordinated, and directed violence across this entire community to create this perception of lawlessness in Canada and to target our community. And when you look at this idea of using criminal gangs and deputized criminals against communities in this manner, this isn't a new phenomenon. This is a matter of policy for the government of India. ਅੱਜ ਆਪਾਂ ਬਿਸ਼ਨੋਈ ਗੈਂਗ ਦੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਪਾਬੰਦੀ ਲੱਗ ਗਈ ਹੈ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਪਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਕੋਈ ਨਵਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਹੱਥ ਕੰਡਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ। 80ਵਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 90ਵਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਲੈਕ ਕੈਟ ਸੀਗੇ, ਆਲਮ ਸੈਨਾ ਹੋਈ, ਹੋਰ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਸੀਗੇ, ਇਹ ਜਿਹੇ ਟੋਲੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਰਿੰਦੇ ਸਿਕਿਉਰਿਟੀ ਏਜੰਸੀਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਜੋ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਹਿੰਸਾ ਵਰਾਉਂਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ, ਇਹ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਸਟੇਟ ਦੀ ਨੀਤੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ। ਇਹ ਕੋਈ ਇਤਫਾਕ ਜਾਂ ਕੋਇਨਸੀਡੈਂਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ। This is a intentional, premeditated, explicit policy decision by the government of India to use criminal gangs to target Sikh activists and dissidents, their family members, and to sow chaos. Human Rights Watch, INSAF, and a number of other human rights organizations have documented the use of these death squads throughout the 80s and 90s, and now it's happening with Lawrence Bishnoi and his gang as well. But the fundamental thing is that these gangs are deputized and directed by the government of India. Canada's Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister appeared before a parliamentary committee and explicitly acknowledged that it's India's Home Affairs Minister. This isn't some rogue officer sitting away and working off the corner of his desk. This is the second most powerful man in India who is coordinating the violence using information that was collected from the consulates and embassies in Canada across this country. After Bhai Hardeep Singh's assassination, shortly afterwards, Narendra Modi appeared at an election rally and made this comment multiple times, boasting and taunting Canada that Modi's India enters the homes of its enemies and kills them. Ajit Doval, who's India's national security advisor, Natalie Drouin's counterpart, a couple of years ago, he went on the record speaking to a police graduating class at their training academies, who talks about how civil society is the new frontier of warfare. This is a senior official that attended the G7 with Prime Minister Modi, with Prime Minister Carney, shook hands and sat in that room and discussed trade deals. It's individuals who are boasting, celebrating, bragging about carrying out extrajudicial assassinations against our community in this country. And these are the individuals that Canadian government officials are meeting in back rooms during photo ops and shaking hands with. So when we talk about the need for these town halls, it's because of this trust deficit. It's because this violence is being coordinated by India and this government's lack of action, the lack of public accountability, and the lack of transparency are enabling this violence. So ਅਖੀਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਵੀਰ ਭੈਣ ਆਪਣੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਪਹੁੰਚੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਤਹਿ ਦਿਲੋਂ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਜੀ ਦੇ ਚਰਨਾਂ 'ਚ ਰੱਖਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ ਵੀ ਅੱਜ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਵਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸ਼ਖਸੀਅਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਟੇਬਲਾਂ ਤੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਆ ਕੁਰਸੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਇਹ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀਆਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਤੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੌਂਪ ਸਕਦੇ ਇਹ ਆਪਣਾ ਇੱਕ ਮੰਚ ਆ this is one of our community gatherings for us to gather, to share our experiences, to share our concerns, and map out our roadmap going forward of how we're going to address this issue. ਜਦੋਂ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਡਿਸਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਕੁਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਐਡਵੋਕੇਸੀ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਲਾਮਬੰਦ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਸਰਗਰਮ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਡਿਸਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਦਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਨੌਜਵਾਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਵੀਰਾਂ ਭੈਣਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਗੂਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਡਿਊਟੀ ਟੂ ਵਾਰਨ ਮਿਲਦੀ ਆ ਸਰਕਾਰਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਟੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੰਦੀਆਂ ਸੰਗਤਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਪ ਮੁਹਾਰੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਆਪ ਲਾਮਬੰਦੀ ਕਰਨੀ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਆ ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹ ਐਕਸਟੋਰਸ਼ਨਸ ਦਾ ਮਸਲਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਇਹ ਸਰਕਾਰਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਨਾਕਾਮੀਆਂ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇੱਥੇ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਹੋਣਾ ਪੈ ਰਿਹਾ ਸੋ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਰੱਖਣ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਵੀ ਅੰਤ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਖੀਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਮੋਢਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਜੋ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਫਰਮਾਇਆ ਆਪਣ ਹੱਥੀਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਆਪ ਹੀ ਕਾਜ ਸਵਾਰੀਏ These town halls are the beginning. This series is a process to begin a national dialogue within the community around how we're going to communicate, how we're going to coordinate, and how we're going to hold our elected officials accountable. So inniya ku beintiyan parwan kariyo. I'm going to hand it over to Simrat now and to our next speaker, and so we can begin today's event. Waheguru ji ka khalsa, Waheguru ji ki fateh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I'm just going to take a few minutes, just like to welcome and thank all the elected officials that are here, our Honorable Mayor Patrick Brown, all the councillors, the Honorable Chief of Peel Police. Nish, thank you for coming. I just want to say just a couple of things. When we talk about extortions and transnational repression, it's not two different things. Both are tools used by one government to instill fear in us here. ਚਾਹੇ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਲੀਡਰ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਾਰਨ ਦੀਆਂ ਧਮਕੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਡਰਾਇਆ ਜਾਵੇ ਚਾਹੇ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਸਿਰ ਕੱਟ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸਮੈਨ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੋਲੋਂ ਪੈਸੇ ਮੰਗ ਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਘਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਬਿਜ਼ਨੈਸਸ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਗੋਲੀਆਂ ਚਲਾ ਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਡਰਾਇਆ ਜਾਵੇ ਸਾਰੀ ਇੱਕੋ ਹੀ ਗੱਲ ਆ The reason we felt the need for this town hall meeting is because the sentiment in the community is that nothing is being done. All three levels of government is being represented here. Our law enforcement agencies are being represented here. So this is a chance for us, for our community to raise their voice, to make their voices heard. ਆਪਾਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਆਨਸਰ ਪੀਰੀਅਡ ਹੋਏਗਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਵੀ ਪੁੱਛਾਂਗੇ, ਪਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਗੱਲ ਬਹੁਤ ਚੰਗੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਸਮਝ ਲੈਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹਦੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਕੋਈ ਗੈਂਗ ਆਪਣੇ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਕੰਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ। ਜਦੋਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਘਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੈਠੇ ਹੋਏ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸਮੈਨ ਨੂੰ ਜੋ ਕਿਸੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਅਟੈਂਡ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਵੀਡੀਓ ਕਾਲ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਆ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੀ ਜੇਲ੍ਹ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ, ਤੇ ਦੂਜੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਲਾਰੈਂਸ ਬਿਸ਼ਨੋਈ ਬੈਠਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਕੈਮਰੇ ਦੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਕਹਿ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਤੂੰ ਪੈਸੇ ਨਾ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਤੇ ਇੰਨੇ ਦਿਨਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੇਰਾ ਕਤਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਊਗਾ। ਇਹ ਲਾਰੈਂਸ ਬਿਸ਼ਨੋਈ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ, ਇਹ ਉਹਦੇ ਤੋਂ ਕਰਾਇਆ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ। ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਬਹੁਤ ਚੰਗੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਸਮਝ ਲੈਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਆ। ਮੈਂ ਫੇਰ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹਣਾ ਕਿ transnational repression and extortions are not separate. They're being used by the Indian government to instill fear in our people here in Canada. ਸਾਡੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਨਵੀਂ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਆ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਸਮਝ ਲੈਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿੰਨੀਆਂ ਮਰਜ਼ੀ ਟ੍ਰੇਡ ਡੀਲ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਕਰ ਲਓ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਮਰਜ਼ੀ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਕਰ ਲਓ, ਪਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਅੱਜ ਤੱਕ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਇੱਕ ਵੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਬਲੇਮ ਲਾਏ ਸੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਐਕਨੋਲਜ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਨਵੋਲਵ ਸੀ। ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡੀ ਚਪੇੜ ਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਮੂੰਹ ਤੇ, ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੀ ਸੋਵਰਨਟੀ ਉੱਤੇ, ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੀ ਸਿਕਿਉਰਿਟੀ ਉੱਤੇ। ਬਸ ਇੰਨੀਆਂ ਕੀ ਬੇਨਤੀਆਂ ਕਿ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਸੀਰੀਅਸਲੀ ਲਈਏ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
Thank you for those words and getting our event started for today. Our next representatives are going to be Mayor Patrick Brown, talking about what's happening on the municipal levels on transnational repression, followed by the Chief of Police, Nishan Dariapa, with a presentation about what the Peel Police is doing on this matter.
Well, first of all, thank you so much to the Sikh Federation, World Sikh Organization, and the Ontario Gurdwaras Committee for hosting such an important town hall today. It's an honor to be here with my council colleagues, Deputy Mayor Harkirat Singh, Councillor Brar, and Councillor Keenan, Councillor Fertini. I believe a town hall is most effective when we look at the path forward. Rather than any of us pointing fingers, it's all about how can we own our areas of responsibility and deal with the very real fear that exists in our community. The city of Brampton is also the city that declared Jaswant Singh Kerala Day, a crusader for freedom and transparency in the midst of misinformation. And I think that declaration speaks to our DNA in Brampton, that we listen, that we advocate. And I can tell you, it was a number of years ago that the Ontario Gurdwara Committee came before our City Council and delegated about foreign interference in transnational crime. I think when we received that delegation, we were a little bit surprised. But the community knew and understood what was happening on the ground. We had got that delegation that it was foreign interference that was responsible for an extrajudicial killing in Surrey. This had not been said in the news yet. This is before Prime Minister Trudeau's announcement that it was from India, but it was the Ontario Gurdwara Committee that said, please write a letter to express our concerns that this is being directed and targeted towards our committee, that what happened in Surrey was not an accident. And for me, the fact that you raised that concern before it was even released speaks to the connectivity you have with the community and the currency that you have. We understand that your advocacy is not without basis. It's based on the real fears and feedback you have from community. I also come here as someone who has received 2 death threats myself, and so when I get phone calls from residents who are horrified and they fear for their family. You know, I've lived that experience where there's been, and I've had my own family very nervous about what is to come. I want you to know with Chief Nish and the Peel Regional Police that we have some of the best when it comes to combating transnational crime. And if you look at some of the advocacy that have come out of Peel Regional Police, we are on the forefront of raising issues that I believe are very relevant to the discussions today. It was, and joined by Chief Nish is Deputy Chief Milovic, who is one of the smartest law enforcement minds in the country when it comes to transnational crime. And I can tell you it was Peel Regional Police that was the first police force in the country that raised concerns about the Bishnoi gang. It's why publicly I went to Ottawa to meet with the public safety minister. I want to thank Ruby Sahota for setting up a meeting last June with the Public Safety Canada, the Justice Minister, of course the Combating Crime Minister, to speak about what we were seeing in Peel Region, about our concerns, about the brazen nature of Bishnoi's activities in the GTA. The fact that even driving on the Gardiner, I would see a decal of a car that it said Bishnoi gang. It was that brazen and that terrifying in our community. The fact that the Government of Canada has responded with that designation, I think speaks to the fact that whether it's at a local level, a provincial level, because there was provincial advocacy around this as well, or at a national level, we're all trying to work together to combat transnational crime. I did want to share with you a few updates. I know the Chief will get into greater detail about this, but sometimes in the midst of an extortion, that gets spread across every WhatsApp group, but you don't hear as often about extortion-related charges. This year there's been 267 extortion-related charges. 267 charges. We have 30 of Peel Regional Police's finest working on a task force directly to combat extortion. But that doesn't take away the scary realities we are facing. In 2023, there was 319 reports of extortion. In 2024, 490 reports. This year to date, in November, we have 436 reports. And I would note for those that, and we saw in the television coverage specifically concerned about Bishnoi, there has been 41 incidents where the person calling referenced the Bishnoi gang. So this is a scourge and a cancer in our society. And there must be zero tolerance in Canada, in Brampton, in Peel Region, for any form of foreign interference, for any form of transnational crime. And I think today is an opportunity to have a conversation of what we can all do together to wipe this out in our region, so families don't live in fear. And I know the fact that we have the Chief of Police here and his senior leadership team speaks to the fact that they're here to take notes to make sure that Brampton and Peel Region can be part of the solution to making sure that we don't need to see more senseless acts of criminality in our community. And to the organizers, thank you for putting this together today, and looking forward to the recommendations that will flow from this discussion. And I believe the Chief has a presentation specifically on what the Peel Regional Police is doing to combat extortion. Before he does, I would just say that when the first reports of Bishnoi-related extortions were coming out in Canada, we had a meeting with Public Safety Canada with the mayors in Edmonton and Surrey, and Dominic LeBlanc at the time was the Public Safety Minister, and they were very responsive to say, what can we do together to combat this? And I'm hoping that what flows from this town hall is that same sense of unity. It doesn't matter where you are in the country, doesn't matter what level of government, but none of us want to tolerate this act of criminality on our soil. What's happened can't continue to happen. Thank you.
Waheguru Ji Ki Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Nish. I'm the Chief of Police for Peel Regional Police. I have Deputy Chief Nick Milinovich, who is in charge of our emergency and investigative services. He has the command for our extortion task force, which I'm going to tell you about. I also have Deputy Chief Mark Andrews, who is also a Brampton resident, strong member of the community, in charge of our front line. In addition, I have multiple of my team members here that are able to assist should there be dialogue or questions. I first want to thank the organizers for giving us the opportunity to talk to you. For everybody's awareness, when there is an act of violence or extortion, it is the responsibility of the local municipal police service to investigate and respond to it. It's the same in Surrey, Edmonton, Calgary. Now we're seeing it even in Quebec. But it's us here at Peel Regional Police. I want to first acknowledge that there are people, business owners, victims, family members of victims that are here in this room that have been affected by it. I can tell you, and in addition to what Mayor Brown has spoken to, is we know it causes tremendous harm to all of you. And it doesn't just stop here in Peel. It radiates right across this country and internationally. We know that. But I'm here to tell you very clearly, we were not going to miss this opportunity to tell you that on behalf of Peel Regional Police, we're absolutely committed to investigate, respond, and stop every one of these incidents where we can as possible. And what you need to hear from me is that we have done things differently here in Peel, unlike any other municipality in this country, and I can assure you probably in North America from an investigative standpoint. Is it enough? Has it stopped it? No, unfortunately, we still continue to see the trends continue. But between Nick and I, we just want to tell you about the landscape here at Peel. So, as you all know, this is not new. We began to see the trends continue to increase over the last 2.5 years, but in the last half of 2023, we began to see a remarkable spike of these extortions. Can I tell you, if we had 1 or 2 a year over the last decade, that was normal. But as you can see from the stats here, in 2023 alone, we began to see 319 extortions. The second column reflects the business owners or businesses that are targeted on social media, but then they also involved acts of violence, which I think we all know have occurred, and a task force. Can I tell you, we are the only, now Lower Mainland has just begun to undertake this, but we're the only police agency in North America to establish task force. So what we did in the discussions with the deputies is to draw our best investigators, those that know the Sikh community, the South Asian community well, and bring them all into a dedicated, and do that. We had to take them from the front line, put them into special assignments, because we knew the complexity of this was continuing to increase. And we also began to see a lot of, let's say, criminals copying each other, doing the same thing. And so the dedicated task force was an extension of our efforts to do that. I think all of you need to know, our responsibility is exclusively here at Peel Region, but we also took a role on at a national level to continue to work. I know I have a senior deputy commissioner from the RCMP, Brian Larkin, and good friend here. He and I have had many conversations, but we've had conversations because some of the individuals responsible are not locally from here. Some of them have been from BC, from other communities, coming here and causing the harm. So throughout the year, we've had many conversations with the chiefs right across Canada. inclusive of even down to Sacramento, California, because we've had connections for US and Canadian back and forth. So this image is what we're showing you to see the spike we've seen increasing in 2024, as well as a slight reduction and now a spike again that we see back again. But the one thing I'd like to highlight to you is those two lines that indicate the number of people being charged and arrested. The projects have resulted in over almost close to 300 charges being laid. I can tell you we're not done yet. We will have more announcements coming in the future about more people being held responsible. As you know, the extension of our police agency to show a dedicated effort is one thing. We have local resources that are dedicated to it. We're working transnationally with our other agencies to investigate it. The other piece that you need to hear from me is that we have had lots of conversations. I want to thank Minister Sahota and our local Peel MPs for their relationship with us. They've been strong advocates for us bringing the attention. I've had multiple conversations, even as recently of this week, with Minister Anand Sangari, the Public Safety Minister, because we know the federal government has responded in BC with supporting the Lower Mainland and Surrey. But I can tell you, we have more incidents here in Peel than anywhere nationally aggregate. And so the efforts to support us is very critical. If I have the resources I need to respond, to arrest and charge individuals, I will do it. And there is more work to be done. And so the support from all levels of government, the dialogue with you to acknowledge the harm being caused in this community, in our community, but for me also to tell you the work being done is very critical, because Mayor Brown is right, and I do know the organizers have also highlighted that in their opening remarks, because there is a feeling that there's nothing being done. And we know that. It bothers us as much as it bothers you as a community. But if I didn't have the opportunity to tell you the work that's happening, the complexity in the investigations, the cyber crime related investigations, all the related charges that are happening, people that are being arrested, charged, and being prosecuted, is happening here in Peel. I can tell you that it is. And there is more work to be done. We know that. So I'm just going to invite Deputy Milinovich, who's responsible for our extortion task force, to speak to you a little bit about the details and the nuances. Nick?
Excellent. Thank you, Chief. Maybe to start, I would just compliment some of what the Chief said, which is, first to thank you.
Hold it nice and close.
Thank you for the invitation to come here and have this conversation. As a police service, we have one objective responsibility, and that is to protect everybody in this room. And so as you see on the graph there, in 2023, we heard from our community. We heard about the anxiety and the pressures and what was happening. And we were the first police service nationally, to initiate a task force. Since that time, and you'll see the figure there, it says over $8 million invested in resourcing and investigations to really fight extortions that were happening in our community. The reality is that that's a conservative figure. We've invested much more than that. We've had an extortion task force since we first became aware of the issue for our community. And I really believe that today's audience and the people that have come here today, extortions, we have a community that identifies what the issues are, but doesn't just identify them, will have the conversations with us and will come to us, and collectively, that's how we're going to approach this. So we currently have 30 members assigned to this task force. The Chief alluded to the fact that you can expect more announcements. We've laid hundreds of charges against dozens and dozens of people who come to our community to target our community. And we're going to continue to take that fight to anybody that would do that. And so our job, very simply, as a police service, is to work with you and then to hold the people accountable that would attempt to target you. And we're going to continue to do that. And I really hope that from the Chief's comments and from what I'm giving you, you understand and believe that we're in this with you. We are willing to commit whatever resources necessary. We are willing to come and have these conversations, and we're going to do everything we can in order to protect you. And I believe that we've done that. Now, what I would say, how you can help us is through conversations like this. If you hear about extortions in the community, or if you receive information of extortions, it is crucially important that you share that with us. Because not only will we investigate it from a police of jurisdiction perspective, but we have regular conversations with our federal partners. That is a really, really important piece. So, you know, one, this is to give you an idea of some of the work that we've done as your local police service. And we are your police service. But also to let you know what you can do to help in that fight. And this is a great example, probably one of the strongest advocates in the space of community safety anywhere in the country as far as mayors are concerned. And continue to have those conversations.
And hand it over back to the MC. We know that there's a fear about reporting. We understand the extortions are underreported. There are people that are in this room that they've become victims, and that's a reflection of how much things have changed. To Nick's point and my point is that has changed. Things like duty to warns and those discussions leave people feeling very helpless. We know that. So our job from the policing standpoint is to do our very best with the resources we have. Any other community. Things that make Peel as beautiful and vibrant as it is being exploited by criminals. It's being exploited. We know we have a role to stop that, but the purpose of my time with you is to make sure you have full confidence that we here in the region are doing our best with our partners to make sure you are safe as best as we can.
Before we continue, I'd like to say thank you to Mayor Patrick Brown and Chief Durayapa for May of this year, Harjit Singh Dada, a local business owner, was assassinated due to extortion by the Vishnoi gang. And as Balpreet Singh, as many of our speakers had mentioned, that there are numerous families dealing with extortion today and currently are dealing with extortion, but are too afraid to speak up. Which is why we're very honored today to have Gurleen Kaur Dada, who's taken the responsibility to spend time and spread awareness on extortion in our community.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Gurleen Kaur Dada. I'm the daughter of Harjit Singh Dada. My dad was the provider of our home. His sudden passing has been extremely hard on me, my family, and especially my mother, who lost her life partner. My grandmother lost her son, at such a young age, and my brother and I lost our father. His death has deeply affected so many people in the community as well. As many of you guys know, he was never someone who stayed quiet. He always spoke up, stood for what was right, and helped anyone who needed him. As an insurance broker with over 20 years of experience in transportation, he guided countless people, international students, business owners, families. He helped everyone without hesitation. He taught us always to do the same. He had a kind and genuine heart. It has now been 6 months since his death. Peel Police has arrested 3 people involved in his killing. But what about the people who orchestrated this? We need answers. We need accountabilities. These cases are rising, and clearly there are flaws in our Canadian system. I understand the authorities say they're doing everything they can, but the crimes are increasing, they're not decreasing. In my father's case, we still do not have an answer about who gave the orders. The ones who planned it, instructed it, and enabled it to be found and brought to justice. But so far, even as a family, we have not been told anything. And honestly, if something like this happened to a different community, I feel like the outcome would have been very different. As there was this case in Surrey, Darshan Singh Sasi. His son said, and I quote, "This is not a community issue or a South Asian community issue. It's a Canadian problem." His family faced a very similar tragedy in British Columbia at the end of October. No family deserves this, and no community should have to live in fear because the real offenders continue to walk free. We're not asking for anything extraordinary. We're asking for justice that truly keeps its citizens safe. Today I stand here not only as a daughter who lost her father, but as a voice for countless families who have been affected by these rising crimes. Find people giving the orders, dismantle these networks, and prove that our lives and our safety matters. But my question still remains. How long must we wait for answer? How long must we wait for change? Our community cannot afford more silence, and my family cannot afford to wait another day for justice. For my father, for my family, and for every Canadian affected by these crimes, we will continue to speak, and we will not stop until the truth comes to light. Thank you. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you so much, Gurleen. We really admire your courage to speak up on this a very important matter. Next up, we are honored to have MPP Merit Stiles, who will offer her remarks on the provincial landscape and the role of Ontario ensuring the safety and the rights of our community.
Thank you so much. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Just one second. I'm really honored to be here with all of you today. My name is Marit Stiles. I'm the leader of the Ontario NDP. I am a member of provincial parliament as well, and I am the leader of the official opposition in Ontario. I'm honored to be here. I want to thank everyone for taking the time today to be here at this town hall. It's incredible to see you all. It's why when I met with the World Sikh Organization, I guess just about a week ago, most recently, I really did jump on the opportunity to come and speak here with you all, because I believe it is so important to have these events, to be able to voice your opinions, to be able to hear from those who are accountable to you, and in a way where you can feel safe and heard. And I think you need that now more than ever before. Sikh Canadians are facing security issues right here. It is not just an isolated crime. It is a genuine threat to your communities, and I want to acknowledge it's happening all across Ontario and Canada. Right here, your community makes up, I think it's about 65% of Brampton's population, making it one of the largest Sikh Punjabi communities in the world outside of India. You are the heart of this community, and you deserve to feel safe. The transnational repression that's happening in our own backyard is real, and I want you to know that we see that and that this foreign intimidation has no place in our country. Thank you. We just heard, of course, from the daughter of Harjit Dada, and just to think that that happened just so few months ago right here in Brampton, after he faced those extortion threats for so many years. And I want to acknowledge, your family, his family, reported the threats that he faced to the Peel Police, and despite that, he was still murdered this year. These crimes are external, they are organized, and they are transnational. And this community is being targeted. Foreign intimidation has no place in Canada. I want you to know we have called for a full public inquiry into Indian-linked transnational repression and the extortion networks that are operating there. We were also calling on the federal government to do what the BC government had done, to label the Lawrence Bishnoi Network a terrorist organization. I'm very pleased that the federal government has taken that action on behalf of the community. You've heard here today from local government, municipal leaders. You're going to hear from federal representatives. But the provincial government has a role too. I want to be really clear about that. I'll give you another example. We at the provincial level could be funding support for victims. That's something that we have called for, like creating a safety planning guide for victims of extortion, facilitating community alerts, information sharing, right, with help of Sikh and Punjabi community leaders. We've had enough warning letters. Families need real supports, proper follow-up, and actual protection. So let's ensure access to relocation support and culturally appropriate trauma counseling and mental health supports. Those are all things that a provincial government can and should be providing right now. Not only that, but we've talked about a dedicated fund to support South Asian businesses to install security equipment like CCTV, cameras, alarm systems, safety lighting. We want to host safety workshops and install shared surveillance infrastructure, while also working to share information in Punjabi to reduce stigma and encourage reporting and regular updates on the progress of Peel's Extortion Investigative Task Force. It was very good to hear some of that reporting today. The province also needs to step up and support our municipalities, like Brampton, because yes, local municipalities like Brampton, they have responsibility for local policing, but they are also covering all kinds of other costs that they shouldn't be covering in the province of Ontario. We need to relieve that pressure so that none of this is downloaded onto all of you. I want to say before I wrap up that I remain committed, and I really want to thank the WSO, the Gurdwara Council, all of the families who've been impacted for sharing their stories with us. We are ready to bring your concerns forward at Queen's Park, and we are your voice in the legislature. So, you know, over the last few weeks in particular, I've grown increasingly frustrated as I see people in our communities here, but in every corner of this province, hurting and afraid for lots of different reasons. And I've personally reached my limit. I've been speaking up against corruption in our own government. I want to tell you, I didn't grow up wealthy or powerful, right? I grew up in a small farming family, but I have never been afraid to stand up to bullies or to speak up when something is wrong. It's how my parents raised me, and I think it's how your parents raised you too. I see the courage in this room. I hear the demand for public accountability, and I know what you are risking. I also get very angry when I see governments prioritize the rights of powerful at the expense of transparency and accountability and justice. Sikh Canadians deserve safety and dignity and freedom from intimidation and from extortion, period. The Sikh community has shown up for the NDP. You have shown up for all of us, of all political stripes. It is time for us, all of us, to show up for you. Thank you very much. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you.
Thank you so much, MPP Stiles, for those remarks. Now we'll proceed with our MP panel for today. This will be about a 60-minute moderated conversation exploring the federal responsibilities on foreign interference and the existing gaps on this matter, and further look at the path forward and the meaningful protection for targeted communities. Please welcome our panel moderators, Balpreet Singh and Prabjot Singh, and we would also like to welcome our MPs as panelists, Ruby Zahoda, Amandeep Soti, Vince Gasparo, and Sonia Sidhu.
ਸੋ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਅਗਲਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਆ ਹੁਣ ਮੋਡਰੇਟਡ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਪੈਨਲ ਐਮਪੀਜ਼ ਤੋਂ ਪੁੱਛੇ ਜਾਣਗੇ ਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੰਗਤ ਆਈ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਮੌਕਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਜਾਊਗਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਵਾਲ ਪੁੱਛ ਸਕਣ ਤੇ ਸਵਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੇ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਦੋਨੋਂ ਚ ਪੁੱਛੇ ਜਾਣਗੇ। ਸੋ ਅਗਲਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਹੁਣ ਐਮਪੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਆ। ਸੋ ਐਜ਼ ਆਈ ਵਾਸ ਸੇਇੰਗ, in English, we will be asking questions in Punjabi and in English, and you can respond in whatever language is more comfortable for you. So I'll start. The issue around transnational oppression and these extortions is really clouded. It's not clear to the community in terms of what the extent is, and anecdotally, we know that a lot of people are not reporting. It's like the iceberg, that we see the tip of the iceberg, but we know that there's a lot more below there. So to understand the scope of this issue, do we have aggregated data from across Canada to understand, just like the Peel Police showed here, the rise of extortion-related crime? Do we have that data? And if not, why not? And do we have an idea of how many duties to warn have been given in Canada? So we know that Sikh activists continue to get duties to warn, and my organization is aware of at least a dozen, at least 12 duties to warn. Do we have that information as to how many duties to warn have been given? And my final question that's related is that we understand that 3 individuals tied to extortion investigations were recently deported. The government hasn't released their names. Were they convicted of any crimes, or were they deported for immigration status issues? Why are the arrests and deportations being done in secret? So in Punjabi, ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਸਵਾਲ ਇਹ ਆ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਐਕਸਟੋਰਸ਼ਨ ਹੋ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਭਰ ਦੀ ਡੇਟਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਕੋਈ? ਦੂਸਰੀ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਡਿਊਟੀਜ਼ ਟੂ ਵਾਰਨ ਮਿਲ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਆਗੂਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਂ ਸਿੱਖ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਮੈਂਬਰਸ ਨੂੰ ਡਿਊਟੀਜ਼ ਟੂ ਵਾਰਨ ਮਿਲ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਗਿਣਤੀ ਹੈ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ? ਤੇ ਤੀਸਰੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਖਬਰ ਆਈ ਆ ਕਿ 3 ਜਾਣੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਕੱਢੇ ਗਏ ਨੇ ਐਕਸਟੋਰਸ਼ਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਕਰਕੇ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਿਲੀਜ਼ ਹੋਏ, ਕੋਈ ਰੀਜ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਂ ਰਿਲੀਜ਼ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋ ਰਹੇ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਕਿਉਂ ਇੱਥੋਂ ਡਿਪੋਰਟ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ? ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਕ੍ਰਿਮੀਨਲ ਕਨਵਿਕਸ਼ਨ ਹੋਈ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਸਟੇਟਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੱਢਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਆ? ਸੋ ਇਹ ਮੇਰੇ ਸਵਾਲ ਨੇ। ਸੋ whoever wants to handle that one.
Okay, maybe I will go from the bottom, like from your last question, because I think it's a recent news story that's just come out about the removals that happened in BC, and they're ongoing. There's about 96 investigations that are happening right now that have been referred from the Surrey Police and the provincial task force there. From regional police associations, I guess, to the task force, and the task force embedded in them has CBSA, and so CBSA is reviewing those requests. Those people were not charged. They have been removed due to contravening IRPA, the Immigration Act, and so that is the basis for those removals. There has been an ask from many people in the community that if people at a lower threshold could be removed, it could help disrupt criminal organizations. And so one of the things that we discussed at the summit in Surrey was the importance of course, investigations, but also being able to disrupt criminal activity. Of course, the ultimate goal is always to collect evidence, to lay charges, to prosecute. But where that is not, where they're unable to do that for certain reasons, there may be people that could be removed due to IRPA violations. And so this is one way of disrupting organized crime in a quicker, efficient manner. And I think that is what the community has been asking for. At least I've been hearing quite clearly from them that they want people who are involved and don't have status here in Canada to be removed. And so through these investigations of about 95 or 96, we'll see if further removals are made. But I know that you'll probably be hearing more news that will be made public on that in the coming weeks. As for a database of aggregated information, there is a conversation happening right now with Stats Canada as to how that could be done. But I will say that in February of 2024, we struck a national coordination support team at the RCMP level, a federal support team to deal with extortions alone. And that team coordinates across the country, connecting cases from region to region. The challenge with this issue in terms of, and I think eventually we can get the disaggregated data, but right now the issue is complex and has many different layers, and the extortions fall under different categories. So it's not conclusive that many of these extortion cases that we're hearing about today have links to any foreign interference, but they may or may not at times have links to transnational crime. So that is the challenge, right? And until an investigation is complete on a file, it's hard to know what that link of source was. How many duties to warn? Maybe I will pass this question, duties to warn. Can I pass that one on to you? What do you want to know about that? Because that is like protected under privacy in terms of with the RCMP or local police, with the individual. What is the question about the duties to warn? I wouldn't even know that. Yeah, I don't have that number. There are duties to warn that are given on many different reasons. I'm assuming that you're talking about duties to warn that are only given due to transnational repression, right? Because local police or jurisdiction gives duty to warns on many other causes, because of many other causes as well. So I don't know. There was a number released a little while back. I believe that number was 12 or 15. 12 was the number that was last released. That's the only number that I'm aware of to date.
Okay, I have a follow-up on that. So ਇੱਕ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਚੁੱਪ ਦਾ ਦਾਨ ਬਖਸ਼ੋ ਥੋੜੇ ਜਿਹਾ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਨੋਇਜ਼ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਸਾਰੇ ਚੁੱਪ ਦਾ ਦਾਨ ਬਖਸ਼ੋ individuals who receive duties to warn, so they have approached my organization and other organizations that have put this town hall together, and what we're hearing is that there are very few supports available to the individual. So you can correct me if I'm mistaken. The individual is given a piece of paper, and then that paper is taken back. And one really shocking case that has come to my attention, it was from the West Coast. The individual asked, "What should I do?" And the answer he got was, "You got to do what you got to do." And then the other real glaring issue here is that the source of the threat is also not disclosed, if I'm correct. In one case, the individual told me that he was interviewed as to who might be responsible, who do you think might be responsible, and 6 months after this duty to warn was given, he approached the RCMP and was told, "This is a decades-long conflict, and we don't expect that the duty to warn is going to expire anytime soon." And that's where he figured out that if it's a decades-long conflict they're referring to, it must be an Indian-sourced or the government of India-sourced threat. So my question is, what steps are being taken to reform the duty to warn system? And I know Justice Hogue in her report said that these reforms are necessary, but at this time, the system really forces activists to do one of two things: either retreat from public life or to proceed without any meaningful protections. So what's being done on this front?
Yeah, Balpreet, that's a really good question. We've had conversations about this. I'm trying to learn more about what happens when a duty of warn is given to an individual. I've learned from individuals with duties to warn. I know it can disrupt their whole entire life in terms of being able to see their children, being able to operate their business or go to work, all of these things. And so when it comes to activists, pure activists, I do believe more should be done to provide information. I'm working with some individuals right now. There is, I think, a lot of confusion in the community too, because I think conversations are happening. So the more I've looked into it, I've been told CSIS does not go out and give duties to warn. That is the last answer I received from CSIS. However, I am hearing from community individuals that CSIS has come and given them a duty to warn. It usually is your local police of jurisdiction or the RCMP. That it is a local police of jurisdiction in many areas of the country that would provide a duty to warn. So I think to some degree this conversation might be inflated in terms of the numbers of duties to warn amongst the community than actual real duties to warn that have been given out. But I hear you, and I'm going to continue to do whatever I can to push to make sure that there are more supports and more accurate information and a better dialogue when delivering a duty to warn, because I understand that it's really difficult, especially when all you've done is been a vocal advocate.
So just in terms of the numbers that we're aware of, we are personally, as an organization, aware of at least a dozen. In fact, in this room, we have, I think, 4. So I don't think the numbers are necessarily inflated. In fact, I probably think that they're underreported. Like I know an individual who's a prominent businessman, and he just doesn't want the fact that he's got this duty to warn to become public because he thinks that if he goes into public, people will be afraid to be around him, and it could affect his business and social life. And B, just doesn't want to be a more active target that, silence him. So I think the problem is probably larger. But I'll pass it on to
12 is the number we were last released publicly. I just mentioned from this podium before. So that would be in line from the last number we publicly have given. But in terms of conversation, sometimes I hear that it could be larger than that, and that I'm not aware of.
So before we just move on, I just want to conclude on this point and just kind of confirm our understanding that we're now sitting at the end of 2025. Bhai Hardeep Singh and 5 other individuals received a duty to warn in the summer of 2022, at which point they were told that you're facing a threat to your life and you're at imminent risk of assassination. No safeguards, no protections are provided. So like Balpreet Singh mentioned, activists are given 2 choices: retreat from public life or proceed with a public threat. So that was in 2022. 2023, Bhai Hardeep Singh is actually assassinated after receiving that warning. In 2024, RCMP and the government comes out with the announcement recognizing that there's been 12 individuals. And so we're saying that at the end of 2025, almost 3 years later, there's been no meaningful steps. There's well wishes or thoughts or intentions, but there's been no meaningful steps to actually address the shortcomings of that process, which is why I think we're seeing a lot of that frustration. So I think shifting now to acknowledging some of the steps that have been done. So मैं पहला पंजाबी दे विच सवाल पुछ लैना ਜਦੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਲਾਰੈਂਸ ਬਿਸ਼ਨੋਈ ਗੈਂਗ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪਾਬੰਦੀ ਲੱਗੀ ਹੈ ਚੰਗੇ ਫਰਸਟ ਸਟੈਪ ਵਜੋਂ ਉਹਦਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ there's a lot of concern ਵੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਵੀ ਬਿਸ਼ਨੋਈ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦਾ ਹੱਥ ਠੋਕਾ ਆ ਇੱਕ ਪਿਆਦਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਮੋਹਰਾ ਆ At the end of the day, India ਹੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਦੇਸ਼ ਜਾਰੀ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਫਲਾਣੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਨੂੰ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਾਰਨਾ ਆ ਸੋ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੇ ਕੀ ਸਟੈਪ ਲਏ ਆ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪਾਬੰਦੀ ਬਿਸ਼ਨੋਈ ਗੈਂਗ ਤੇ ਲੱਗੀ ਆ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਇਹ falls short. So just in English and MP Salt, I'm going to put this to you just because your capacity with public safety. So when we look at the prescription of the Bishnoi gang, I think it's been welcomed within the community as a first step to put more resources towards clamping down on the Bishnoi gang particularly, but there is a lot of frustration that it feels like it's primarily cosmetic in terms of addressing the root of the issue when our agencies and government officials have said that it's Indian government officials that are giving the orders to Bishnoi to actually enact this violence in the first place. So when we talk about terrorism, in the criminal code, the definition of a terrorist act is that there's a criminal act, a form of violence or an act or an omission. There's an intent to intimidate, and there's a religious, political, or ideological motive behind an act of terrorism. So when we talk about the prescription of the Bishnoi gang, can you talk about what motive are we prescribing or giving to Bishnoi? Why are they doing this violence in the first place if we're not going to talk about India?
Yeah, so I'd like to start from the beginning. I think at the podium, there were a lot of, the presentation was really good when Balpreet and yourself took us through the history, where we've come from, where we are at right now. And, a comment was made that the government needs to do this, the government needs to do that. And I agree that, we are partners in this fight, but I would say that it is the government that has been taking a lead on this issue. It is the government of Canada that has come out and put a spotlight on this issue. It is the government of Canada that has done a foreign interference inquiry. It is us who has through our, agencies, of course, going through the proper steps and the channels that has listed the Bishnoi gang as a terrorist entity in this country, along with 6 other criminal organizations. That's never been done before. So we recognize that times are changing and we need to adapt and we need to do things differently and that the community faces a threat. We are the ones who came publicly to say the community faces a threat. So I hear you and I'm committed to making sure that where there are gaps and where there are challenges, we continue to work to address those. But by no means is the government stepping back and not pursuing any of these cases. This is going to continue. We are a rule of law country. It's why I have the Deputy Commissioner here with me. These cases are ongoing. The work is being done. As for the duties to warn, I give you my commitment today that I'm going to go back and figure out how we can do better in order to provide safety plans and work with those that have been given duties to warn. But when it comes to what we can do about public safety, since I've been a member of Parliament, I have not seen a government be so active in the House of Commons legislatively in terms of bills to bring forward, not just cosmetic things that you're saying. And it's easy to now say that that's cosmetic. At the time, everyone was asking for it. Right? Like, let me just say, everybody was saying, you've got to list Bishnoi as a terrorist entity. Premiers were calling for it. Our mayor was calling for it. Everybody was calling for it. And there's a process. And that does give tools to our law enforcement agency here on the ground. Chief Nish has said that that is a welcome change, because that will, if a case is connected to that, if that's where the strings lead, that gives them immense power to act and maybe even disrupt the crime from happening in the first place. That's important. That's what I think the community wants to see. But in terms of other changes we've brought forward, there's many, many pieces of legislation that are currently in the House that we as a minority need support for. First is C2, and I would say even before C2, that's the Stronger Borders Bill. Investment of $1.8 billion at our borders. This is unprecedented. No government has put so much money to beefing up their national security and their border security. We are now in process of hiring 1,000 new CBSA agents that will help with removals, that will help stop incoming bad actors through our borders, of course. They are the first line of defense. 1,000 new RCMP personnel that can help put more resources towards the extortion issue and transnational crime and repression across this country. So that's very important. But also lawful access tools. Lawful access is tools given to police to be able to connect, because you're saying, what's the root source? What's the root cause? In order to be able to often figure out who is connected at the end of a compute, whether it's an IP address or whether it's a phone number or there's tracing devices involved. If someone is being followed and there's a tracing device, right now police does not have the capacity, right, to be able to go after that. And there's many cases that were listed up there that are non-business related extortion cases. And one of the highest types of extortion cases that the country is dealing with is child exploitation. That's a huge issue. Far more cases, like 30,000 about just last year in this country. Lawful access tools would help us protect our kids. That's a big issue. I know the issue we're here to talk about today is narrow, but I'm just saying it would help immensely in this issue. And it would help in many other crimes that are even, that we have many, many more reports on. And so I'd love the help of the community to push the Conservatives, to push parliamentarians on all sides to support these bills.
Sorry, I'm just gonna step in really quick. I'm being mindful of time.
Yeah.
And so just want to go back to the question and just honing in, because I acknowledge the context. It's very helpful. And to clarify, I acknowledged from the beginning that the community welcomed the prescription of the gang. The issue or the question is about what motive are we ascribing to the Bishnoi gang, and recognizing that India is the one that's directing a terrorist entity to conduct violence in Canada. In other cases,
well, see, you're deriving
Iran,
to conclusions
for Iran,
that I'm not able
so I'm going to finish my question.
Support necessary.
I'm going to finish the question. So in the example of Iran, for example, Canada has designated or acknowledged Iran as a sponsor of terrorism. If Amit Shah and Indian government officials are the ones who are directing the Bishnoi gang, a terrorist organization in Canada, are we going to acknowledge India as a state sponsor of terrorism?
That's a good question. We're not at that point in any of these cases. So that's what's important. You're asking me to be the judge here in the trial today, and I'm not. So there's a process to legal cases, and that case has to go through the court system. It has to take intelligence and make it and turn it into evidence, and then we can see what the result of that will be. But to sit here today and to say that every extortion case that is coming forward that we can conclusively, or as far as like, I'm not the ones doing the investigations. None of the politicians up here are responsible for investigations. We have to take the lead from our law enforcement, and they have definitely told us when they came out in November 2023 in that press conference that was referenced, that there was some link to initial cases. But right now, what our local police is telling us is that they're not able to establish that link in many other cases. And so, absolutely, if the link is established at some point and it comes out in a court case, then it gives us the ability to do more. I'll go back to, again, at every step of the way, we've been putting a spotlight on this issue. We've been highlighting this issue, whether it's in Parliament, whether it's at press conferences, whether it's at forums like this. Like, we're your partners in this. I think it's absolutely unacceptable what's happening to the community. And it has been addressed and will continue to address it. Like, we're not going to abandon the concerns of the community. And I know that that sentiment is out there, so I just want to reassure everyone that your government, the members of parliament up here, are equally concerned, but we've got to let the police and we've got to let the judicial system do their job and draw those links and find out those motives. In order to figure out motives and all of those things, I know you guys don't want to hear about legislation and all of that stuff, because it's maybe not as spicy. It gives our police the tools to figure out those things and then be able to bring those to light in a court of law. And that's very important. And so that's a part of the process. And we need to make sure that our police have modern tools so that they can go after these transnational criminal organizations and bring that evidence into a courtroom and then bring it to light to all of us.
Thanks, Ruby.
Can I just say one thing here? And I'm going to say this in English because I don't think you want to hear my Punjabi. Yeah, I don't think it would go well. What I think is important is, and a few of your speakers touched on it, I think you touched on it quite eloquently, which is this is just not a Sikh problem or a Peel region problem. And what I can tell you is that you and the community have allies in Ottawa, like me and others, who want to see the community be safe and want to see not only the community be safe, but see the community prosper. And that's why our new government is focused on some of the legislation that you heard Minister Sahota talk about, and there's others. Anti-hate legislation, bail reform, all of these tools provide our national security apparatus and our local police with the tools they need to go after the bad guys and put them away. We don't enforce the laws. You don't want the federal government to enforce the laws, because if we have to enforce the laws, things have gone really, really bad. That is the job of the province and your local police force. So we are providing them with the tools and the resources they need to go after these people, and we're going to keep working to make sure you are all safe. Thank you.
I think the disconnect is perhaps that it was our government officials that leaked the name of Amit Shah to the Washington Post and then testified to Amit Shah ordering these criminal activities here in Canada. So this wasn't Sikhs making these allegations. These were government officials making these allegations. And we talk about sanctions. I'm not aware of courts being involved in sanctions. These are government decisions to sanction Iran, to sanction Russia for unacceptable behavior. So the courts have their role, but when we're talking about government officials in foreign countries ordering hits in Canada, then I think that's definitely the responsibility of the federal government who leaked this information to begin with. So my question is that the Privy Council, and I mentioned this in my opening remarks, provided a briefing note to Prime Minister Carney that said that Canada should require public accountability measures in order to re-engage with India. why haven't we seen any public accountability measures against India? Continue to deny any responsibility for any criminal activity here in Canada or foreign interference or oppression. I'm not activity here in Canada or foreign interference or transnational repression. I'm not aware of any accountability measures. So will you commit today to push your ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ accountability ਹੋਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ, ਕੋਈ ਜਵਾਬਦੇਹ ਹੋਣੇ ਚਾਹੀਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਸਾਡੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਐਮਪੀ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਤੇ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਕਹਿਣਗੇ ਕਿ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਨੂੰ ਜਵਾਬਦੇਹ ਹੋਲਡ ਕਰਨਾ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈਗਾ ਹੈ?
Of course, public accountability would be very welcome. I wasn't pleased by some of the comments that the High Commissioner has made. I think news in terms of those comments and with the media, I think you saw some retraction of that in a follow-up interview that the High Commissioner did. But anyways, those are is that along the way, when Prime Minister Carney met with Prime Minister Modi, when our trade minister met with their trade minister, when our foreign affairs minister met with their foreign affairs minister, when our national security advisor and our commissioner of the RCMP went and met with their law enforcement officials, this issue has always come up. It's always been front and central. It's always been a part of the conversation. And I think it's necessary to have dialogue and to have that conversation. So those are ongoing conversations. What would be wonderful in parallel is to see the trials, the court cases come out, because those links that are made in a court of law will be really helpful. To the issues that have been brought up today. So that law enforcement dialogue is continuing. What's happening in our courts of law, the investigations that our law enforcement are doing are all continuing, and we also will continue to call on the Indian government to acknowledge what they are willing to acknowledge at this point. But the pressure is continuing to be put on, and in every conversation we're bringing up and raising that issue at every point. And so I want everyone to recognize that that is not something that's been swept under the carpet by any means. It's brought up at every occasion we have any conversation with Indian officials.
So I want to follow up again, kind of touching again on the lack of action on reforming duty to warrants, for example, over the past 2.5 years. When we look structurally at the issue of foreign interference, this is not a new problem. The Sikh community has been dealing with foreign interference for the past 40 years. We've been being targeted by transnational repression for the past 40 years. What lessons has the government learned is our concern. In 2020, the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians published an annual report. In that report, every mention of India and Canada's failures to address Indian foreign interference was completely redacted. When that unredacted report gets published or reported on in the media, it talks very clearly about the government making explicit, intentional policy decisions to pull punches and not clamp down on Indian intelligence networks in Canada in order to further their foreign policy priorities, exporting canola and the Prime Minister's trip that was coming up to India at that time. The NZCOP published in their report that Canada is vulnerable to foreign interference because the tools to combat foreign interference are controlled by the Foreign Affairs Ministry, and foreign policy priorities and economic trade interests continually prioritize domestic harms of foreign interference. So that's coming from the NZCOP report, not from Prabhat Singh or Balpreet Singh. So if that report is published in 2020, 5 years ago, where we've had a bipartisan committee talking about this massive vulnerability, and 5 years later, we're now seeing this realignment and restoration of ties and normalization with India, again, to further economic interests, to the detriment of public safety. What lessons have been learned? What has changed in those past 5 years? Taking that lesson from the NZCOP report, taking that lesson from redactions about India's foreign interference activities, hiding it from the public, and failing to act and prioritizing economic ties over the community's safety and well-being.
So all along, trade has continued with India, all countries that are also vulnerable to foreign interference. It's not just Canada. This is across the board in Western countries that we have seen cases, and that was also brought up during the inquiry. Canada is not alone when it comes to this type of foreign interference or transnational repression. When you say that any of this comes to the detriment of public safety, that is just absolutely not true. That is not true. And that's all I have to say about that, because law enforcement does not take, as MP Gasparo was just saying right now, PS Gasparo, law enforcement does not take direction from us. There is a clear, distinct divide between the political side and the law enforcement side when it comes to pursuing cases. And so any trade never stopped, right? In all these years, like even when in 2023, the National Security Advisor, the Prime Minister came out, brought this into the spotlight, wanted Canadians to know, we want to educate the Sikh community and all communities as to how transnational repression and foreign interference can impact communities. There's educational campaigns happening with CSIS. That's evolved in the way that CSIS treats these issues. I think there's been a real evolution as to how to work with communities, and you've had more interaction with CSIS than ever in the past. Can there be improvements made? Sure, and I'm willing and committed, like I said, to continue working on that, to make even further improvements. But there is an open dialogue happening with the community, and there is a recognition that there are issues and that those issues will be tackled by law enforcement. So we will never do anything that is a detriment to public safety. Public safety is our first priority.
So the government has taken decisions in the past to the detriment of our community and to public safety when foreign policy priorities were prioritized over dismantling Indian intelligence networks that ultimately laid the groundwork for Bhai Hardeep Singh's assassination and murder in Canada.
I'm going to now, ਹੁਣ program ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਇਆ ਹੁਣ ਅੱਗੇ ਵਧਣਾ ਆ if on the panel ਅਮਨਦੀਪ ਜੀ ਸੋਨੀਆ ਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ briefly ਕੋਈ ਆਪਣੇ remark ਦੇਣੇ ਨੇ I think more than happy to hear from you ਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੰਗਤ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਵਾਲ ਪੁੱਛਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੌਕਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਹੁਣ ਜਾਊਗਾ so briefly ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ remarks ਦੇਣੇ ਨੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਫਿਰ ਸੰਗਤ ਨੂੰ ਮੌਕਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਜਾਊਗਾ
I'll pass it on to my colleagues if they want to say anything, but I wanted to also mention 2 other measures that have been long awaited. I believe the Foreign Interference Registry and Commissioner that is being appointed, and I think in the coming weeks there is going to be a name announced very soon for that registry. That's another measure that our government is taking to bring more transparency to this issue and at least give more teeth to the ability of law enforcement and our security agencies to be able to act when someone is doing activity in a clandestine way.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਮੇਰਾ ਨਾਮ ਹੈ ਅਮਨਦੀਪ ਸੋਢੀ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਨਵੀਂ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਆਫ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਹੈਗੀ ਹਾਂ ਬਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਸਾਰੀ ਸੰਗਤ ਦਾ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਹਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਏ ਹੋ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਸਾਂਝੇ ਕਰਨ ਆਏ ਹੋ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰਨ ਆਏ ਹੋ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਅੱਗੇ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਕਰ ਸਕੀਏ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਸਹੋਰਾ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਮੈਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਐਲੈਬੋਰੇਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਫੇਸ ਕਰਦੀ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਭੁੱਲੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਦੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਭੁੱਲਾਂਗੇ ਨਹੀਂ and we will never forget what has happened in our country over the last few years. With every discussion that we've had amongst Sikh caucus or with other elected officials within our government, we have always prioritized this notion of Sikh Canadians and the safety of Sikh Canadians here in Canada. And that's something that we will continue to bring up. That is something that we will continue to fight for because we know that Sikh issues are not just Sikh issues, but they are Canadian issues. All of you here today are here as an advocate, and as are we. We're here together as one big family to combat these issues that our community is facing. Our community is one of the most joint, unified communities that there is here in Canada and that we have. ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਚੀਜ਼ ਸਿੱਖ ਕੌਮ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧੀਆ ਲੱਗਦੀ ਆ is ਜੇ ਇੱਕ ਜਣਾ ਕਹੇ ਵੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ 10 ਜਣੇ ਖੜੇ ਹੁੰਨੇ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ. And I think we need to stay unified on this issue. We need to continue to work together like how we are right now. We can see that progress has been made in the past. We will continue to work towards progress as well. And as much as you guys need us politicians, we need you guys just as much, if not even more, because our strength is you guys. To amplify what we are doing is through you. To help us in what we do is also through you. So that's what I'd like to say to you guys today. Baki jehde vi asi hor measures chak sakde hain tusi please sanu dassiyo because your feedback is very very valuable to us. Asi sare itthe aj ta aaya because we agree on the same issue. We have the same values and the beliefs and we have the same concerns. So whatever it is that we can continue to do to help you guys, we're here. We're here for you, and we ultimately are one big family working towards the same goal. So, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Mera naam Sonia Sidhu, मैं member parliament Brampton South to जिवें अमन ने किया हैगा कि this is a Canadian issue. We are a big family. पर मैं ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ 2-4 ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਮੈਂ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਇਹ 3-4 ਸਾਲ ਤੋਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ communities ਨੂੰ just not here in Brampton, Surrey, Edmonton, Montreal ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਾਫੀ community ਨੇ extortions ਕੱਲੇ extortions ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ these are the Canadian issue. ਮੈਂ ਬਹੁਤ thank you ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ organizers ਨੂੰ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਹੋਰ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀਆਂ meetings ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਆ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਇੱਕ federal government ਦੇ ਕੱਲੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਨਿਕਲਣਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਰਲ ਕੇ communities, provincial government, municipal and police forces, agencies ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਹੱਲ ਨਿਕਲਣਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਦੂਸਰਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਬਲਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਹੁਣੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਵੀ ਆਏ ਸੀਗੇ ਵੀ ਆਰ ਆਲ देयर ਜੋ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੈਂ 3-4 ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹੂੰਗੀ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਰੂਬੀ ਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹੂੰਗੀ ਕਿ we are one of you. We know that our community is hurting. So ਸਾਰੇ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਕਿ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਿਕੋਜ਼ ਦਿਸ ਇਜ਼ ਅ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਵੀ ਆਰ ਅ ਪਾਰਟ ਆਫ ਦ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 4 ਬਿੱਲ ਆ Ruby is fighting because ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਕਾਰਨੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਇਹ ਬਣਾ ਕੇ ਇੱਕ ਰੋਲ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਬਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ Ruby ਸਹੂਲਤਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਕਿ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੀ we do care about that ਸੋ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੇ C2 C12 C14 ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ 3 ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਿੱਲ ਆ she is fighting every other day It's not a blame game क्योंकि साडे कंजर्वेटिव पार्टी च भी मैंबर हैगे आ मैं अपील करना चाहूँगी कि तुसी सारे दूसरे मैंबरां नूं भी कहो ताकि असीं जिहड़े बिल इकट्ठे करके ताकि पुलिस एजेंसीज़ नूं जिहड़ियां होर इनहैंस मिलदे जिवें कि रूबी ने एक्सप्लेन दस्सिया एक्सप्लेनेशन दे विच कि जदों नंबर एक्सटॉर्शंस दे विच नंबर आउंदे आ दे कैन नॉट ट्रेस आउट जे इफ दे डोंट हैव दैट पावर सो जिहड़ा C2 आ C14 आ ਤੇ ਦੂਸਰਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ C12 ਵਾ ਜੇ ਬਿੱਲ ਪਾਸ ਆ ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਵੀ ਇਨ ਦ ਮਿਨੋਰਿਟੀ ਤੇ ਜੇ ਇਹ ਦੂਸਰੀਆਂ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹ ਪਾਸ ਹੋਣੇ ਆ ਜਦੋਂ ਬਿੱਲ ਪਾਸ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਕੰਟਰੋਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਇਸ ਸਾਈਡ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਪਰ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਕੁਝ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਲੈਟਸ ਵਰਕ ਟੂਗੇਦਰ ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਕਸੈਸਫੁਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ BC ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਈ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ puri conference hui a summit hui a and then they are planning to do other one in Brampton GTA te ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹੋ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਹੀ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਨੂੰ ਟਾਈਮ ਤੇ ਟਾਈਮ ਅਸੀਂ ਰੇਜ਼ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਬਿਸ਼ਨੋਈ ਗੈਂਗ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਟੈਰਰਿਸਟ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੈਂ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਜਸਟ ਟੈਰਰਿਸਟ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਐਂਟੀਟੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਾਰ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਗਈ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਮੋਰ ਸਟੈਪ ਅਦਰਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਉਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਕੀਤੇ ਗਏ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਕੁਝ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਫੀਡਬੈਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਲੋੜ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਤੇ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਐਕਸਟੋਰਸ਼ਨਸ ਦੀ ਕਾਲ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਆ ਸੋ ਜਸਟ ਟੈਲ ਦ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਏਜੰਸੀਜ਼ ਟਾਸਕ ਫੋਰਸ ਬਣੀ ਆ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ NCIM Ruby explained that ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਏਜੰਸੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਬਣਾਈ ਸੀ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਹੁਤ $1.7 billion ਹੁਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਗਏ ਹੈਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਫੋਰਸਿਸ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਇਕੱਠੀਆਂ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਪਾਰਟ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀ ਲੈਟਸ ਵਰਕ ਟੂਗੇਦਰ ਟੂ ਕੰਬੈਟ ਦਿਸ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਦੂਸਰੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਸੀਰੀਅਸ ਹੈਗਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਟਾਈਮ ਤੋਂ ਟਾਈਮ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਹੀ ਮੈਂ ਦੇਖਦੀ ਹਾਂ ਰੂਬੀ ਸਹੂਤਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਹੈਗੇ ਜਸਟਿਸ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਇੱਥੋਂ ਵੀ ਚਾਹੇ ਮੇਅਰ ਆਫ ਬਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਚਾਹੇ ਕੋਈ ਹੋਰ ਮੇਅਰ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਐਵਰੀ ਡੇ ਜੇ ਮੈਂ ਕਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਚਰਚਾ ਉੱਥੇ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਵੀ ਆਰ ਨਾਟ ਜਸਟ ਇੱਥੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਅੱਜ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਆ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਨੋਟਸ ਬਣਾਏ ਹੋਏ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਵੀ ਗੋਨਾ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਵਿਦ ਆਲ ਦ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰਸ ਤੇ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਟਾਈਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਆਰ ਕਮਿੰਗ ਬੈਕ ਵਿਦ ਦ ਸਮਿਟ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਿ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕਾਰਡ ਸਬਮਿਟ ਹੋਈ ਸੀਗੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਕੁਝ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨਿਕਲੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਹੋਊਗਾ ਕਿ ਕਾਰਡ ਥੈਫਟ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਥੱਲੇ ਗਿਆ ਹੈਗਾ ਦਿਸ ਇਜ਼ ਵੀ ਨੀਡ ਟੂ ਵਰਕ ਟੂਗੇਦਰ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਕੁਝ ਨਾ ਕੁਝ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਕਰ ਸਕੀਏ ਤੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਤੇ ਕੰਬੈਟ ਕਰ ਸਕੀਏ ਬਾਕੀ ਵੀ ਆਰ ਨਾਟ ਜਸਟ ਇਹ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਮੈਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਮੰਨਦੀ ਕਿ ਵੀ ਆਰ ਜਸਟ ਸਿਟਿੰਗ ਟੂਗੇਦਰ We are there. We are standing with you with solidarity. ਜਿੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹੋਗੇ we'll be there. ਅੱਜ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਨੋਟਸ ਬਣਾਏ ਆ events ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਸੀਂ PS ਭੇਜਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਨੇ and Ruby is working so hard. Ruby needs your help ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹ ਬਿੱਲ ਪਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਕੁਝ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ We are with you. ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਦੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਫੀਡਬੈਕ ਦੇਣੀ ਆ so you can email us after 15th. We are coming in the community and then ਜਿਹੜੀ combat crime ਵਾਸਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਰ ਵੱਡੀ summit ਜਿਹੜੀ GTA ਤੇ ਹੋਊਗੀ Why Ruby did in BC? Because we want to, she's going all part of the country to listen that. And then just Minister Sean Fraser. ਉਹ ਵੀ ਸਾਰੇ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਬਿੱਲ ਪਾਸ ਕਰ ਲੈਣੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ we need your support to talk to the other parties so we can pass the bill and then we can be stronger to combat that crime. Thank you so much for organizing this.
So ਹੁਣ ਅਗਲਾ portion ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆ the next portion will be where the Sangat can ask questions and I understand we have someone that already has the first mic. ਹਾਂਜੀ
So my question is regarding the perception that Ottawa is more worried about upsetting India than protecting Sikh Canadians who are being threatened, extorted, and harmed.
If that's a question, then that's not true. Two things can be done at the same time. So no, we are not worried about that. Law enforcement is still engaging on this issue. Our national security advisor is still engaging India at every opportunity on this issue. So it's not a concern.
So you guys mentioned these are Canadian issues, and you're looking for feedback as well. So we're just wondering what the threshold is and how many threats, shootings, extortions, or even deaths does India have to cross before your government actually does something as a response?
I just want to correct the narrative again. I think in Canada we have done more to bring light to this issue than any country around the world. And these issues are happening in the UK, they're happening in the US, they're happening in New Zealand, Australia, all around. And it is only in Canada that our law enforcement agencies, our leaders have come out and addressed this issue, acknowledged this issue, and are tackling this issue head on. And so, one death, one extortion, or one is too many. So I would just say that, I hear your frustration and pain maybe through that question, and our commitment again to you is that we're going to work to do whatever we can to address this issue. But Canada is a leader on this front. Canada has been vocal. Canada has been raising this issue. Canada is not worried about having this difficult conversation with any country that is involved in transnational repression.
I also just wanted to add to that as well. There were discussions earlier about what the current government under Mark Carney is doing, and I really want to emphasize Bill C-2, which is our Strong Borders Act. So a $1.8 billion investment is going into this. We're protecting our borders nationally. And we're hiring those 1,000 RCMP officers, the 1,000 CBSA officers, and we're giving them the resources necessary to help combat transnational repression and some of the threats that Canadians face these days. I also want to place a very heavy emphasis on the lawful access tools that we're giving Peel Regional Police. We've seen the numbers, the data that they've shown us, and we believe, and we've also heard, that these lawful access measures that we're providing them will help them continue to do their job, continue to battle extortion cases, crime-related cases, and this whole notion that Minister Sahota had brought up about being able to trace someone under some of the lawful access tools that were given. So if, for example, someone is facing a threat, we're able to provide Peel Police with the resources necessary to track the IP address, to see where that threat is coming from, so that we can procedurally speed things up as well. So I just wanted to place a little bit more of an emphasis on this is what the current government is doing. I also just wanted to quickly say that as much as we want, we can continue to talk about these issues and we can continue to bring things forward, but we really need Parliament to be unified on this issue and to help the government pass these bills through. So I know some of you may not be from Brampton here today, and if you're from different regions where you have your local MPs there too, make sure you let them know that this is what the current government is trying to do, and we need to provide supports for them to be able to pass this legislation in the House of Commons as well. So thank you.
So one question from me is, so when Prime Minister Carney, Minister Anand, and Minister Sidhu are actively trying to appease India without any mention of safety, it's inferred by Sikhs that their safety isn't paramount. But this inference can be made by law enforcement that appeasing India is more important federally than holding them accountable, especially when law enforcement agencies themselves are telling the federal government not to move forward without accountability. So how can we believe that the federal directives being given to law enforcement about the safety of Sikhs and India's transnational repression are different than what's happening publicly?
So I would just say no one is trying to appease India. What we're trying to do is make sure we have a strong Canadian economy. We're trying to appease Canadians. Our global economic situation has completely shifted. So this has nothing to do with appeasing another country. This has to do with us continuing our economic stability, but not at the cost of the public safety, not at the cost of anyone. So law enforcement will still continue to do their jobs, the courts will still continue to do their jobs, and we will continue to raise the issue. Like, it is the Canadian government that's been raising this issue at every turn. Our law enforcement has been raising the issue. Our committees, our politicians, all of us at this table, we're with you, we're on the same side. I know we've been put on this stage and this pedestal here today, but really, like, we've been fighting this fight along with you and raising this. And I think I even heard from the community that there was a lot of relief that, oh, the government is recognizing what we're going through. The government has, you know, connected some ties to intelligence that they have. I heard a lot of relief, even from the organizations that are holding this event today, that finally they're being seen, they're being recognized for their issue. You know, no government before has really done that. We are trying to work together to see how we can continue to run a country, but to do so safely and not at the stake of any one citizen or any community.
I have a quick question here at the back. So my question is, what is the Sikh caucus doing to inform the PM and the other members of the government of the community's concerns and hold the government accountable for substantive action?
Amandeep just mentioned that this is something that the Sikh caucus talks about continuously with the Prime Minister. So this is something that is top of mind. It is our top priority. It is the Prime Minister is well versed, knowledgeable on the issue. Our National Security Advisor, it's not the Sikh caucus's job either, really. It is our job to convey community concerns and what we understand having, you know, a shared background. But our National Security Advisor, our RCMP Commissioner, they are informing the Prime Minister as well. And so we, you know, I guess if there's one thing you leave with today, I just want to say that this is a top concern and we're continuing to move forward with law enforcement on this issue. We're not leaving it behind. We're continuing action on this issue.
Hi, in the back here. Canada is the target of ongoing Indian disinformation, whether claims that PM Trudeau's plane was carrying cocaine into India or the accused in Hardeep Singh Nijjar's assassination have been released due to lack of evidence, etc. So what is Canada doing to expose and debunk these false narratives targeting Sikhs despite public or numerous public examples? There's been no public mechanism to combat or identify Indian disinformation to the Canadian public other than the evidence that came through the FIC.
That's a great question. That disinformation, misinformation, all of that is a big concern, and that issue was raised, and there were suggestions and recommendations given by through the Hogue Commission as well. So Justice Hogue did make some recommendations. We are working towards other mechanisms. The Foreign Interference Registry and Commissioner is one of those things that we're acting on. But there are other methods that are used by, for instance, Taiwan. Australia has gone down this route as well of having a place where government can list misinformation when it comes out. We're trying to figure out how we go about doing that. We have a lot of challenges in our in our country in terms of freedom of speech and how we are able to dismantle and correct disinformation. But it's a big concern of mine. It keeps me up at night. I think it is weakening our democracies, and it's really important to figure out the proper way to address. But I will say that this is where the Conservatives and us have a big disagreement, right? This is why lawful access is not being allowed to move forward right now. This is why our cybersecurity bill is not even, moving at all. It's because there are Canadians that feel that freedom of speech should not be corrected, stopped. Who's the person correcting it? Is it the government correcting it? What are the government's motives? Like, this is a big conversation, and it's one that was addressed in the Hogue Commission report. So we're moving forward on many of the recommendations, and I'd be happy to, as they come, maybe give an update to the organizers of this forum today as to which ones are complete, which ones are underway. But I hear your concern on that. Media is also another pillar of our democracy that helps correct the narrative, legitimate, and even saying that word it's controversial sometimes, but our well-known media agencies that put out and counter a lot of this information when it comes out, that's an important pillar as well.
You mentioned earlier that the crimes that were committed and those that were killed cannot be tied back to the Bishnoi gang and cannot be tied back to the Indian government, even though that Prime Minister Narendra Modi was quoted after by Hardeep Singh's assassination as saying, quote, "India kills its enemies in their own homes," end quote, as a way to taunt Canada and the Sikh community, boasting about their actions. And his right-hand man, Amit Shah, has even been identified as a center of India's spree of violence. The agent who laid the groundwork in Canada in 2017 to 2018 has now been appointed as the chief of the RAW agency, which is the primary intelligence agency of India. What indication does your government think there is that India has changed or desisted from these actions? And I want to add on by asking, I've heard a consistent theme throughout the answers from the panel that Canada is doing as much as they can possibly do. They're doing more than other countries within the G7 or the G20. But Canada is the country where a Canadian citizen was killed on Canadian soil, and so the bare minimum is for Canada to do that. Historically, a citizen of a country being killed on that country's soil has had a lot more pushback from the country of origin. So are Sikh lives somehow now less valuable than, say, Ukrainian lives or other lives from other communities? Or is there another reason that Canada has not taken actions that historically are in line with international law in supporting a war criminal responsible for the 2002 Gujarat riots that are called the Genocide by Genocide Watch?
Thank you for that question. First, I'd say that when I had said that whether links could be drawn, I'm talking about all cases. I'm not drawing the links either, right? Like, I'm not doing the investigations. I feel some of the answers that are asked for here today are investigations that are ongoing, and we will have answers at one point when charges are laid. But Mayor Brown was here today, the chief was here. He said 267 charges have been laid related to extortions in the Peel region. And what they have told me is they can't draw those links. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying whether I just want to feel like drawing links or not drawing links. So what you're referencing is specific cases. And so there obviously have been links drawn in particular cases. And then there are many cases where there have been no links drawn. So I'm just saying that we have to distinguish between, when that chart was put up, all those cases. It is the government and our federal law enforcement that came out and drew those links. And absolutely, a Canadian was killed on Canadian soil, and I think that is like the most severe form of transnational repression we have ever seen, and that's exactly why we've come out and spoken clearly and loudly about that, and there's more work to continue to do on that front. So thank you for that question.
Ruby, my question is to you specifically. You are looking for evidence. We have so much evidence for the last 40 years about oppression of the Sikhs that you can ask me. I can give you all the evidence from the Sikh National Archives of Canada website. I have been working with WSO. I was president of the WSO also. And back from the days of 1984, when Joe Clark, as a foreign minister, went to India, Indira's funeral, he poisoned the ears of our politicians here that World Sikh Council is a terrorist organization. At that time, it's World Sikh Council who stood up. And on 10th of March 1988, the whole debate for 3 days was on people, all parties, MPs asking, are you a foreign minister of India or a foreign minister of Canada? He has no answer. They are just putting all the human rights on the side. And I have been supporting a party, a Liberal Party, since Pierre Elliott Trudeau. And now when I get information, donations, I put them in the trash. Mr. Carney has everything. He put it upside down what our Justin Trudeau did for. He was so strong to say. So our over Sikh MPs are also giving roundabout answers. If you need evidence, I can provide the evidence.
So, to that, Uncle Ji, thank you for that. मैं गोलमोल नहीं कर रही, मैनू पोजीशन च इस तरह दी पाया है तुसी सारिਆਂ ने भी तुसी मैं तो law enforcement ਦੇ answer ਮੰਗ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ, and I can't give you that answer. मैं evidence कोई नहीं ਮੰਗ ਰਹੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਤੋਂ, ਮੈਨੂੰ evidence ਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਲੋੜ ਨਹੀਂ. ਮੈਂ ਵੀ understand ਕਰਦੀ ਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਆਪਣੀ community ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਆਈ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ, ਕਿੰਨਾ situations ਦੇ through ਲੰਗੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ, ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈਗਾ. I'm born and raised here, but I understand the history and I understand the complications. I'm not asking for any evidence. That's not for me to, like, I'm not, again, I'm not prosecuting these cases. I'm sure a court of law will be asking for evidence, right? And in order to have charges result in convictions, ਉਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਐਵੀਡੈਂਸ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ, ਉਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਕਲੀਅਰ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਕੋਰਟ ਰੂਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ. ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਸਿਰਫ ਇੱਕ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਮੇਕਰ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ, ਰਾਈਟ? ਸੋ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਲਾਅ ਇਨਫੋਰਸਮੈਂਟ ਲਈ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੁਝ ਲਾਜ਼ ਚੇਂਜ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਜਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਕਮਿਸ਼ਨਰ ਖੜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਟ੍ਰਾਂਸਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਫੋਰਨ ਇੰਟਰਫੀਅਰੈਂਸ ਲਈ, ਸੋ ਦੈਟ ਪਬਲਿਕ ਤੱਕ ਹੋਰ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਮਿਲ ਸਕੇ. ਜੋ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੀ ਜੋ ਸ਼ੱਕ ਸੀਗੀ ਦੂਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਦੂਰ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਉਸ ਵਕਤ ਜਦੋਂ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਇੱਕ ਦੁਖਨਾਕ ਹਾਦਸੇ ਦੇ ਥਰੂ ਲੰਘੀ ਹੈਗੀ, ਐਂਡ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਨਿੱਜਰ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਜਿਸ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਦੇ ਥਰੂ ਲੰਘੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ. ਮੈਂ ਸਮਝਦੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਹੋ, ਪਰ ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋਲ ਇਸ ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਚੀਜ਼ ਦਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ. ਜੋ ਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਿਕਿਉਰਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਸਿਚੁਏਸ਼ਨਸ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਿਲੀਜ਼ ਕਰਦੇ, ਨਾ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਤੱਕ ਰਿਲੀਜ਼ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, ਪਰ ਉਹ ਫਿਗਰ ਆਊਟ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਇੰਟੈਲੀਜੈਂਸ ਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਐਵੀਡੈਂਸ ਤੱਕ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ. ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੁਝ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕਲੀਅਰ ਪਾਵਰਸ ਵੀ ਦੇਣੇ ਪੈਂਦੇ ਆ. ਉਹ ਪਾਵਰਸ ਦੇ ਕਈ ਵਾਰ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਕਈ ਵਾਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਲਾਅ ਇਨਫੋਰਸਮੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਪਾਵਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਦੇਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਅਲੱਗ ਰੀਜ਼ਨਸ ਲਈ, ਪਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਤੋਂ ਬਿਨਾਂ ਉਹ ਕਈ ਵਾਰ ਉਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਤੇ ਐਕਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ. ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਲੈਕਟ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕੋਰਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੇਸ਼ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹ ਕਈ ਵਾਰ ਸਹੀ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਾਂ ਐਵੀਡੈਂਸ ਰੂਲਸ ਦੇ ਥੱਲੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਲੈਕਟ, ਜੁਡੀਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਵਾਰੰਟ ਦੇ ਥੱਲੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਲੈਕਟ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ. ਮੈਂ ਉਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਸੋ ਦੈਟ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੇਸਿਸ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਸਕਸੈਸਫੁਲ ਹੋ ਸਕਣ, ਆਪਾਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੀਕਿਊਟ ਕਰ ਸਕੀਏ, ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵਿਕਟਮਸ ਹੈਗੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਸਟਿਸ ਮਿਲ ਸਕੇ, ਜਿਹੜੇ guilty ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਉਹ highest levels ਤੇ ਹੋਵੇ, even if that is political people or at the highest levels, no one is immune to being investigated, to being charged, and so we are committed to following that forward. ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ pass ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈਗਾ. That is all I guess I would say, and that's नहीं, मैं पॉलिसी बना सकती हूँ. Yes.
Excuse me. There's a lineup for questions. There's a lineup for questions. Allow me to ask my question, bro.
So police वाले थे इस तरह की गल नहीं कह के गए भी वो कुछ नहीं कर सकते. ਉਹ सोनू समा ते दिखा के गए ने भी उन्होंने किन्ने चार्जेस ले कीते हैगे ने, की काम कर रहे हैगे ने. ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਜੁਆਇੰਟ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਐਕਸਟੋਰਸ਼ਨਸ ਤੇ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ. ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ recommendations ਵੀ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ. What recommendations are needed in order to improve our bail and our sentencing system. Those have been tabled in the House. So everybody has a role to play. We're all trying to do our level. And I would say this was a good town hall. Thank you for having it. We've all been here to listen to your concerns, to answer these concerns. There are provincial members that came into this room and left. So I've stayed here. I've stayed here because I care about the community. And we are tackling this issue in every way possible, whether it is from one province to the other. What I am saying is, BSC, 80 different changes criminal code ਚ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ. 80 different changes. I haven't seen a justice bill ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 80 different changes ਇੱਕ criminal code ਲਈ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਂਦਾ ਗਿਆ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ. So we're strengthening our laws and we are listening to feedback. We're working on the cases that have been brought forward. So I want to thank you all for giving me this opportunity and for speaking at this forum. And I understand your concerns, and conversation doesn't end here. ਅੱਜ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਦੀ conclusion ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀ, ਪਰ this is an ongoing thing. ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੁਝ ਕਹਿ ਕੇ ਵੀ ਗਏ ਹੈਗੇ ਹੋ ਵੀ ਕਈ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ, ਕਈ decades ਤੋਂ ਸਿੱਖ ਇਸ issue ਨੂੰ ਫੇਸ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ in different ways. I think ਹੁਣ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਵਾਰ ਇਹ issue ਉੱਬਲ ਕੇ open arena ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਈ ਹੈਗੀ, and this is a good thing. ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਚੰਗੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ openly discuss ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ. And we're willing to work with you. Law enforcement's willing to be in these rooms with everyone to make sure bi jehda sada relationship hai aun wale time de vich ek different vadiya relationship hove. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. So thank you. We're going to be doing just a couple of final remarks and then we're going to call it. Ruby, if I could get you to stay. Ruby? Okay. Okay. ਚਲੋ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਆਉਣ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ. ਤੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਸਵਾਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੁੱਛ ਸਕੇ, ਬਟ ਇੰਨਾ ਹੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ. ਪ੍ਰਭਜੋਤ ਸਿੰਘ, ਕੋਈ ਫਾਈਨਲ ਰਿਮਾਰਕਸ?
ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਆਉਣ ਦਾ ਇੱਥੇ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਹੈਗਾ. ਜੇ ਵੀਰ ਆਪਣੇ ਚੁੱਪ ਦਾ ਦਾਨ ਬਖਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ 2 ਮਿੰਟਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਾਂ ਸਮਾਪਤੀ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਨੇ ਆ. ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਤਹਿ ਦਿਲੋਂ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਆ. ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਕੱਠ ਕੀਤੇ, ਸਾਡਾ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਸਟੈਪ ਹੈਗਾ. ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਦਿਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੈਲਗਰੀ ਤੇ ਸਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਕੀਤੇ ਜਾਣਗੇ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਰਾਏ ਲਈ ਜਾਊਗੀ. ਤੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੇਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਟੀਚਾ ਇਹੀ ਆ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਸਾਂਝੀ ਰਾਏ ਤੇ ਸਾਂਝੀ ਰਣਨੀਤੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਿੱਖ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਵੱਲੋਂ, ਸੰਗਤਾਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਕੀ ਅਗਲਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਆਪਾਂ ਲਿਖਣਾ ਹੈਗਾ. ਸੋ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਤਹਿ ਦਿਲੋਂ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ. ਭੁੱਲ ਚੁੱਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਖਿਮਾ ਕਰਿਓ ਜੀ. ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ